I do, and I'll tell you, well, there was one thing that was different about that. When Bisping and I competed, we competed on Fox, and there was a push and pull behind the scenes of who was in charge in terms of it was the UFC's production or if it was a Fox production, and they were brand new. I want to say Bisping and I competed on Fox 2, but if I'm wrong, it was Fox 3. It was still brand new, but I think it was the very second one. So it was a little bit different, and what we were asked to do and who was asking it of us was more. The UFC is very polite that they're going to load you up with media. You're going to be working. You're going to be cutting your weight, and they're going to give you a nice trip, and everything's going to be great, but you're going to work fight week, but not on weigh-in day. On weigh-in day until you leave the octagon from the contest, the following day, you will have absolutely nothing asked of you. Get up whenever you want, cut that weight, handle your day, go back to your room, deal with your team. Your phone's not ringing. And I bring that to you because there was only one exception in my entire UFC career, and it was when we went with Fox. But again, we never knew when the cameras popped up and somebody says, can you guys come over here? We didn't know who was asking us. Was it Fox or the UFC? Now, for Bisping and I, it wouldn't matter what that answer was. We were going to do it. We were going to cooperate. But you're asking me about, because you referenced how sucked and lean we looked. And yes, we were both, you get so thirsty when you're cutting weight, when you're dehydrated. It's hard to speak because you need that moisture, you need that saliva in your mouth. So when it's gone, it's very hard. The words, they barely come out. So I can barely speak. Bisping can barely speak. I'm trying to stay in character. He's looking at me like I was a fool. And the only reason I do remember this is when they cut, okay, you're both, now Bisping and I are standing there together, right? I'm coming after him, he's coming after me, they yell cut, now we're just there together, and we've got to walk off. And I remember Bisping, who not really talked to me that much before the fight, but I remember he looked at me and he called me a fool. But it was sincere. I think he called me a jester, which is like a British term for fool, but he said something that made me very insecure about the whole thing. I was like, oh, we didn't argue, he just made oh, you sound like a fool. So that's the reason I remember that. What do I feel fighters and grapplers should focus on if they want to have a career in combat, aside from the techniques of combat? Well, let me tell you something I've always really respected. Conan Silveira, he is the head coach of American Top Team out in Florida, the American Top Team. And Conan was bringing in a lot of fighters from Brazil, and he would make it mandatory. Just like you have to be in practice every day at 3 o'clock, just like you're going to do strength and conditioning twice a week, and you're going to get one individual workout on boxing and everything you had to do twice a week, you were taking English. And he would bring in the tutor, and he had a classroom, and he'd bring everybody into it, and the guy would teach him English because Conan understood martial arts. Keyword there not being martial, keyword being art. Art being what? Expression. And what better way to express and communicate than through words? And I always appreciated that Conan did it. I always thought he should have got a level of credit for that. But it also speaks to a higher degree that, yes, it is important that you learn to some degree how to handle media. And I could sum it up for you very quickly. Don't ever answer a question. We handle questions. It doesn't matter in the least bit what question comes out of that person's mouth. They're not there to help you. Handle the question and get your message out. That would be my advice. Now, that's in a nutshell. That's very short, but that's what I would offer for you. And it is important. And you will know full well if you're succeeding by a focus group known as social media. How many likes you're getting, how many engagements, how many retweets is a direct reflection of what a good job or a poor job that will tell you change course you're doing with your communication. Do I think that Chimaev is going to fight for a title, either welterweight or middleweight this year? Is he really that good? Two-part question. Yeah, I think he's pretty damn good. I do. Just because I see how hype works and reputation matters. You guys can relate to that to when you were little kids on the playground or fast forward to high school. Everybody knew who was who. Everybody knew who the baddest dude in the school was. I could ask any of you right now. You would all be able to give me an answer for your freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year. But fighting works that same way. It does come through reputation. We're a very small group. Whether we're a global sport or not, it's a very small group. I could find any fighter within 2 phone calls. No problem. I could know what a guy does, what a guy works on, how many days a week he spars within 2 phone calls. Generally 1. I'm giving myself 2 just so it's an absolute true statement when I tell you any. It's a small group. and the reputation coming out around Chimaev's work ethic. I don't really care how well a guy performs. There's plenty of flashes in the pan in all walks of entertainment. We could look into Rob Van Winkle, Vanilla Ice. There's flashes in the pan. There's guys that come and they go. There's flashes within the sport. Sure, your sport's just a window. Your career's just a window. It's a snapshot in time. If you have an ability to extend it, you're going to be told, good job, a little bit more than the guy that couldn't do it. But why is that? Has to do with work ethic. A lot of guys will go out there and they'll get on a roll. They'll have 3-4 good fights. They got 3-4 trick moves. The world hasn't seen it yet. They go out, they put it on display. They go get some big wins. Somebody else sits down, studies that with their coaches, understands, circle left, don't take one single step to the right, takes down his whole arsenal, go kick his ass, and that happens too. So it has to come down to work ethic. I appreciate that Chimaev was 4 times to bat and hit 4 home runs. I'm really impressed that he's done it 2 different ways, not just with the ground and pound that he's known of, but when he took on Merchant 3, he threw a big hook and knocked out the larger man. And then you got guys like Gustafsson, who nobody questions how good Gus is at fighting, let alone stand-up fighting. And Gus says, no, man, this guy's just as good on his feet. I mean, those reputations start to swirl. I've heard some very interesting stories of Khamzat Chimaev and Sean Strickland in the gym together. Neither guy will give an inch, where they have fought in the gym. A number of stories like that. So, yeah, I think that Chimaev is pretty good. The question is, can you stay there? First off, are you as good as they say you are? And the first problem there is if you believe it. You can always read what people say about you. If you believe it, you've got a problem. Whether it's good or bad, if you believe it, you now have a problem. I don't think he believes it. I believe he is hungry. I believe he is just starting. I am hearing from the practice room. I am hearing that he is very disciplined within life. Now, you did give me an ability within your question to say, would he fight for a belt at 70 or at 85? We've only been given one clue, but it was by the boss. And Dana said he's 4 fights away from even being in a discussion of a title fight, specifically against Usman. All signs that we have on Chimaev are pointing towards, and only towards, 170. I don't agree with that. I think that's a bad move. I believe he should go to 185. I believe if you can do equal in 2 weight classes, you should not go smaller. That is a misconception shared by everybody. If I can do fine at 205, then I'll do great at 85, which means I'll go 170. That is the belief. That is the thought process. That is wrong. History says that's wrong. The greats, the champions, the greats that don't cut a lot of weight, they never did. They put their stresses and their strains and their energies purely into the competition itself, not into beating the scale. Either way, no, Chimaev won't be in there for a belt. Is he good enough to be, and could he compete within a year? I think he could do it today. What do I like on a pizza? Okay, this is a very different question because I'm from the West Coast. On the West Coast, you could put pineapple on a pizza and nobody would look at you weird. You go to New York and ask the guy to put pineapple on a pizza, he'll kick you out of the store. I would never want a pizza that was just cheese. That's what a 5-year-old gets. In fact, my son is 5, and that's what he gets. I want to busy it up a little bit. You want to know my favorite combination? I'll do pepperoni, I'll do black olives, I will do tomato, and I will do mushroom. If I'm really lucky, I'll have a place that has a good ranch dip. I've never been to a pizza restaurant that's ranch is worth a damn. Never. But if by some chance, or maybe my wife made it, we got a delivery, and that would be, I don't mind a little hot sauce on there. You want to know a trick I learned in Brazil? You want to know what Bamba puts on his pizza? Ketchup. He'll get a pizza and put ketchup. I was, oh, that's disgusting. He said, why? He said, you got tomato sauce, you put it on the bottom, why would you not put it on top? I tried it, it was great. Believe it or not, ketchup was great. Now, at the same time that I'm teasing you and I'm saying I would never get a cheese pizza, if I'm on the East Coast, I only want cheese. Just give me a sausage, mushroom, forget all that stuff. I think that's great stuff, but East Coast pizza, it's much better, it's much different. You want it wimpy, you want it to fall apart in your hand, almost where you need 2 hands. There's some stuff that you want, a little bit of grease on your hand. And if you can get that garlic salt, I encourage you to sprinkle a little bit on top. In today's landscape, do you need to have champ status to be considered the greatest of all time? If Henry Cejudo was to return at 145 pounds and capture the belt, would that automatically make him the greatest combat athlete of all time? I want to go in reverse order. I'll start with Cejudo. Yes. Cejudo has claim to that right now. Defeating Demetrius Johnson, who was ranked number 1 in the world pound for pound, gave Cejudo claim. Becoming a world champion, if only for a night, gives Cejudo claim. For Cejudo to beat Dillashaw, who was the reigning undisputed champion above him in weight, gives Cejudo claim. For Cejudo become the 135-pound champion gives Henry claim, particularly when you say combat athlete. I love that you use that phrasing because I think that's a real complimentary term. Cejudo at yet a different weight class. So many people forget that. When he did the Olympics in freestyle wrestling, he did it at 121 pounds, a different sport, form of combat, and a different weight class. And I never feel like Henry got credit for that. And yes, if Henry were to come back and capture the 45-pound belt, yes, but make sure you understand, it is not Henry being the 45-pound champion that absolutely ends that argument. It is Henry defeating Volkanovski for the 145-pound championship that ends the argument. When I was in a fight, did I ever listen to a cornerman's advice, or was the adrenaline so high that I was just focused on the fight itself? I could pick Clayton Heyer's voice out of a room. You could have 15,000 people. You could have horns going off, you yelling in all sorts of languages, and Clayton could have whispered. Clayton could have talked to me like this. I would have heard him. And I trusted him fully. Now, there was times when I didn't have the energy or I didn't feel confident enough in the skill. There was times where I couldn't do what he wanted me to do. But yes, I could hear him, and yes, I would try to do what he said. How do pay-per-view points work? And how does pay-per-view affect the card, including the prelims overall? Well, I'm going to give you one answer. And there's some discussion within my answer. But to give you the broad stroke, boilerplate, anybody that qualifies for pay-per-view points, all the contracts are going to look the same. Again, that's a broad stroke. What does it look like? Okay, you have something called thresholds. You must meet a threshold to even activate your pay-per-view clause. The threshold within the Ultimate Fighting Championship is 200,000. Now, 200,000 pay-per-views is going to generate $10 million, which the company is saying, look, that's just what it costs to put on the event. I believe them. If you go around an arena, and imagine the UFC, anything you buy in bulk, you can get a discount on it. And I would imagine after all these years and all the stuff that they now own as opposed to lease, they probably got a little bit better prices. But to put on an event and to factor in, okay, this is going to be $10 million. By the time you get they have venues that are hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not sure you guys are aware of that. To rent Madison Square Garden, enough time for a build-in and a weigh-in, you're going to need 48 hours in there. You're looking at about $330,000. And then you get to pay the commission 6% and you get to pay the city 6%. So you now have 100% that you're going to bring in. You're starting with 88% for the pleasure of doing business in the city. Oh, and by the way, you're going to pay the better part of $500,000 just for the building. This is before you advertise and decorate and fill it up and bring in your talent. $10 million is a very reasonable guess. That would be on the upside, but it's very reasonable. And at the time that these contracts came out, it was probably a little closer to that $10 million than perhaps they've been able to negotiate their way down to. After 200,000, what do you get? So then you're going to have your next threshold of a 400,000. So between 200 and 400,000, you're going to get 50 cents per buy. At 400,000 to 700,000, you're going to get $1.25 per buy. Anything over 700 to $1 million, you're going to get $3. Anything over $1 million, you get $3.50, and some guys can go as high as $5. So it's a threshold game. It is greatly incentivized to make sure you do a good job and that you help the promoter with the promotion. The problem that it has, like everything as a byproduct, is what I just said to you is never clearly stated. It should be obvious, but the fighter doesn't always hear it that way. And so many times the fighter will do absolutely nothing. And then he'll even look around and go, well, you can't be mad at me. If I did nothing and I brought in less, you just pay me less. Our bargain is good. And nobody's ever going to correct them. Nobody ever wants this to look like wrestling where they come out and tell you how important it is to draw a house. I don't know why you hide from that fact. It's important that you draw a house. It's important that you draw numbers. It's important that you move merchandise. Wrestling does not apologize for it. fighting because it doesn't want to look like wrestling, won't even discuss it. I don't agree with that. I think if somebody's being given a piece of a business, they don't have to buy in. You're being given it out of generosity. Something can be expected. And I do think that conversation should be a little bit clearer. Who do I think the first triple division champ will be? Likely answer, we haven't seen him yet. Most likely that person is a 6th grader right now. Possibly a 3rd grader right now. Not because somebody wouldn't have the skill. Look, Henry Cejudo is one hell of a competitor. You can forget about fighting. You can take the punches and the kicks and the chokes out of it. It can be any rules, any way you want to do it. Henry is as solid mentally as anybody. He's already got 2 down. He's at least exploring 3, so he has to be part of the conversation. Many people are saying Chimaev. And many people are saying he could do it right now. If Chimaev can't even get to the first title fight for a year and a half, I would be very light on that. Because then you got to clean out that division just for the opportunity to go up. You got to clean that division out just for the opportunity to go up again. It's a very tough spot. In addition, now we're just talking skill. We're just talking who is physically and mentally good enough to do it. That's a very small piece of this. You've got to get the opportunity. You're not going to get anything that you don't ask for. And Chimaev is yet to ask for the opportunity to fight in 3 different weight classes. Jon Jones never asked for the opportunity to fight in 3 different weight classes. Henry Cejudo is the first person to make the ask, not to mention he's already got 2 down. I think the bigger problem that Henry's going to have, if we're just using Henry as an example, isn't whether he's good enough to do it. It's whether he can get the opportunity to try. So when you ask me who's going to do it, I think what you're looking for is who's the best and who could actually pull it off. But my question is a little bit more literal to your point. And I don't know that anybody's going to get the opportunity in the next 10 or 15 years. So if that right man or woman comes along and they've studied the game and they understand how to manipulate, does that guy exist? Because I haven't met him yet. I haven't met anybody that puts as much into their career as they do into their sport. I know a lot of people that put a lot into their sport, but they don't know about the career. They don't get the business side. They don't understand that opportunities don't just come. You've got to go out there and create them, and then you've got to take them. What is my favorite episode of Seinfeld? I've seen them all, and I've seen them all multiple times. I can tell you my least favorite was the ending. The Good Samaritan, and they go to jail and they bring him. I mean, that was garbage. That was rotten garbage. And most shows go out like that. Most shows' worst episode ever will be the last one ever. For a variety of reasons. So I've answered you in reverse. I will tell you though, remember when people used to have a celebrity crush? That was like a game. People would play, who's your celebrity crush? Like that was a thing. My celebrity crush was Elaine Bennis. I thought she was fire, and I followed her since. I followed her over to Veep, did a wonderful job. The only person on Seinfeld who couldn't act and thus has never done another show because they just don't have the skill is Jerry. The rest of the characters were pretty good. Now, George picked some bum scripts. Kramer got labeled in a certain way. He had his own stories. Julia Louis-Dreyfus was the true thespian there, and she was a true talent there. And I think that if I was discussing my favorites, the one where she danced, and what was that to? Was that to Witchy Woman? Ooh, Witchy Woman. Remember when she was doing this thing with the fingers and everybody stopped to watch her? That was great. I still get that in memes every now and then. My manager, Leah, will send that to me like we're having a text conversation. She'll just send me Elaine dancing. So I'm going to go with that one where Elaine Bennis danced and everybody teased her. That's my favorite episode. Did I put my children into wrestling/jiu-jitsu? And if so, how young did I start them? No. I have my own dream. My own dream is I'll be able to go down that path with my son. I have never in my life, and I've spent my entire life in this sport, seen it work when dad is pushing son. Dad can encourage. Dad can pay for. Dad can chauffeur. That's where it needs to end. And I wanted to wrestle, and I was hungry for it, and I loved the sport. My father wanted me to wrestle. He was an old wrestler. He loved the sport. He told me no. And the next year it would come around and signups were coming and I come home with the little flyer and he told me no. And the next year would come around and I had the little, and he told me no. So now I'm approaching 9 years old, and then he laid out a system as to what I would need to do for him to take me to my first ever practice. And I can't fully remember what it was. It was a lot of work. It had to do with hay bales. We had some horses. It had to do with levels of strength, had to do with some cartwheels and some, how many push-ups I could do. Like I had to go and do these things on my own, be able to come and perform and show him that that's what I wanted to do. Now, I know that that was his hope and goal and dream, and my mother later shared that with me. But as I look back, now I get it. And that's very different than if he had said, hey, we're Sonnens and we wrestle. Because his brothers all wrestled. He wrestled. All my cousins wrestled. It was definitely something within the family. But he wanted to make sure that I wanted to do it and I wasn't felt forced into it because it is so difficult and hard. So I am doing that same approach with my son. I will expose him to every sport. Whatever he wants to do is what we will do. I will expose him to wrestling, and I am now. He comes to jiu-jitsu and watches me practice. I take him to wrestling where I'm the coach, but he's not allowed to get on the mat. He has to be in the corner, and he can bring a book or he can bring a toy, but he has to be in the corner. And it's hard for him to stay there. He jumps out and he's grabbing some kid and I got to send him back to the corner. I got to send him back. But I will tell you as a coach, if you start your kid in either one of those things prior to 9 years old, it's a huge disservice. The kid doesn't have to be old enough or good enough to win. He has to be old enough and interested enough to try to win. It's a very big deal. You do not want to bring a kid in that thinks that this is for fun and then teach him that this is for fun. I will never lie to anybody about wrestling. Wrestling is not fun. I view wrestling as necessary. I view that adversity and the conflicts and the commitment and the hard work and the drive that you've got to learn those things somewhere. Now, how far you want to go with that, if that's just a couple of seasons through junior high or maybe it's just your high school career, whatever you want to do with that, again, that's up to you. So I will expose him to it. He is not begging me yet. He's asking me. I will keep telling him no until it turns into a beg, or we won't do it. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Okay. This is a very tricky one because Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg answered this question. She was asked it, I believe, by David Letterman to be funny. If I'm wrong, it was Jay Leno, but it was one of these late night shows that are anything but funny. But these guys are trying, right? They're untalented, but they're trying. So they think, okay, let's ask the Supreme Court Justice's most ridiculous question. However, she took the time to answer it, and she said yes. She said it is meat between two slices of bread. That is the definition of a sandwich, and that, yes, it is a sandwich. Now, I guess that would be official. The Supreme Court Justice weighed in on it, and only one, I think whatever their answer is, just by default of it being our only answer, makes it the official answer. I just don't think that's a sandwich. And I don't think that Ruth Ginsburg is correct when she says meat between bread, therefore constitutes a sandwich. I know a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, by example, is between bread. It is what's between the bread that is very relevant, but it has no meat at all. So I don't know that I agree with the definition. And I also think it comes down to condiments. Not to mention the fact that whoever created a hot dog did a great job, and he doesn't think it's a sandwich. I think if I were the inventor of something, particularly something that caught on, nationwide and even worldwide, I would have poetic license to then define what it is. If I don't want it to be in the category of sandwich, I don't think anybody, including a Supreme Court justice, should be able to tell me it is.